Hi, everyone. Welcome to Crime Family. This week, I'll be telling you about the tragic and infuriating case of a father's control over his family, specifically his two daughters. A father who wanted to dictate their every move, who planned to set them up with arranged marriages overseas, and whose alleged abuse led to a series of events that are both chilling and devastating. This is the story of the lives and deaths of Sarah and Amina Saeed. As I said in the intro, this is the case of Sarah and Amina Saeed. What do you guys know about this case, if anything?
I remember listening to another podcast episode about it, but that was a while ago. So I do kind of know like what happens and why it happens, but I kind of need a refresher on the details.
I don't know anything about this case. The name doesn't sound familiar. Maybe when you get into it, I'll remember it. But as of right now, off the top of my head, I don't remember this case at all. So I'm interested to see what it's about.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy and sad and kind of frustrating in lots of different parts. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of like the family history, just so you kind of have an idea all the people involved. So Yaser Saeed was originally born in Egypt, and he was the oldest of 5 children. He had 3 younger brothers and a sister who was the youngest of the family. And he went to the United States originally on a student visa in 1983 and eventually settled in Texas. And I don't know the exact years of some of this stuff. It doesn't really get into that. But shortly after he went to Texas, he eventually ended up meeting Patricia Owens. And they began dating. And they eventually got married. But Patricia had actually dated Yaser's younger brother, Yasin, before she started dating Yaser. And that didn't really work out, so she eventually got together with Yaser and they got married. But at the time that they got married, he was 14 years older than her. He was 29 and she was only 15. Her parents eventually consented to the marriage after Yaser convinced them that he was quite well off, he would give her a good life, and that he would take care of her. Because, they weren't, super well off. Like, Patricia's family wasn't super well off, and they thought, like, they liked him, and they thought that he could give her a good life and everything like that. So even though she was only 15, which is weird, they did consent to her marrying Yaser. And after the marriage, Yaser was able to get his green card, and he eventually went on to become a permanent resident and a U.S. citizen in 1997. And so Patricia actually says herself in an interview in the documentary called The Price of Honor that looking back on everything, she doesn't really think that it was really love at all, but it was more of a desperate attempt to leave her home life and her current financial situation. She wanted to start a new life with Yaser. Her family was quite poor, and she just really wanted to get away from that and kind of start this new life with Yaser. However, things didn't really quite pan out as she had hoped. Patricia ended up working all of the time because Yaser didn't really want to work, because initially he said that he would take care of her, but kind of ended up being the other way around. She was kind of becoming the breadwinner of the family and had to take on all these jobs. He did have one job, and that was like he would drive a taxi, but other than that he didn't really have much of a work ethic, and Patricia was taking on that huge responsibility of being the person making the money in the house. And this began early on in the marriage, so it was early on when she realized that it wasn't really going to be all that he had said it would be. Patricia says that Yaser had wanted to put distance between Patricia and the rest of her family because he said they were Americans and he kind of saw them as lesser than. He didn't really like Americans all that much. They interviewed Jill Alpenalp, who is Sarah and Amina's great aunt, and she actually says in the documentary that Yaser saw Patricia's family as white trailer trash. So like that kind of just gives you like what he thought of her and her family. So, he obviously wanted to marry Patricia, so he thought highly of her, but not necessarily of the rest of her family. But soon after the marriage began, the abuse also began. So Yaser would constantly say that he regretted marrying an American, and oftentimes, like Patricia describes things like he would come home late from work, he would wake her up when she was sleeping, and then purposely just make a total mess of the bedroom and then force her to clean it all up while he would watch. And she said that he would often sometimes cut her with a knife if she wouldn't have sex with him. And yes, she says that Yaser allegedly had several affairs throughout their marriage. So it wasn't a happy marriage at all. And there's also like photographs that they took where like he's holding a knife to her throat. Ones where like
I'm curious, were these affairs like with other white American women, or were they like East Indian women? I'm feeling like he's like prejudiced or a little bit racist towards like white American people.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't actually go into that, like who these other women were. It's just Patricia says in one of the interviews that he had 6 affairs, but that's all that she says 6 affairs that she knows of. So
did he just marry her to get a green card to become American citizen?
It's possible. It's never confirmed that that's a reason or anything, but
I feel like just because his like just the way he's acting towards her and stuff, I feel like it was just like a way just to get his green card to become American citizen. And I don't know, I just feel like that's kind of a shitty way to put it. But
yeah, even saying he regrets marrying an American, like maybe he regrets marrying her, but why an American? Like there's definitely that like, prejudice happening.
There's some pictures where he would like she would be dressed in a hijab and like holding guns and stuff like that. So like these are like random pictures that like he would make her pose for, and then there's one where he's holding a knife to her throat. So it's very weird. In the documentary, like it's kind of strange because Patricia actually kind of backtracks and she says those were just for fun, like they weren't supposed to be taken seriously, they were just kind of a thing that they wanted to do. So I don't know if she's just kind of in denial, but yeah, it's kind of a weird situation to say the least. So the couple actually went on to have 3 children. So their first child, Islam, was born when Patricia was just 16 years old. And then they had their first daughter, Amina, when she was 17. And then their youngest daughter, Sarah, was born when Patricia was 18. So within 3 years, she had 3 children. When the kids were growing up, like it seemed like they had a typical American upbringing. They do... there's multiple people that say that Yaser was a very controlling parent and was a little bit concerned with them becoming more American because they were just, they were growing up in Texas and they were just, doing regular things that teenagers do. Don't
live in America if you don't want your children to grow up American.
I know. It's a very weird, yeah. It's like so many contradictions. It's like he doesn't have to live there, but he's choosing to live there and then hating that they're
you can't hate that culture. If you like, even if he went there because he thought his kids would have a better life, you can't hate that culture for that, right? Like you just, I understand maybe you want to like preserve your own culture, but you can't hate on the culture that you like ran to.
Yeah, and like his 3 kids are now like American citizens. They were born in the States, so like they are Americans. So if he hated America so much, he shouldn't have had 3 American children. But
just right from the get-go, this guy seems like a shitty person.
Oh yeah, it gets worse.
Like what the fuck?
Yeah, we don't even know what happened yet, and we're like dissing him. But yeah, it just seems like not cool.
And Patricia, and like obviously he's not a good person based on the details I'll get into, but Patricia does say in the documentary too, like she's aware of back before he moved to the US, he had gotten angry at a coworker, and then when it's in his car, and then when the coworker was like coming out of work, he actually ran over the coworker 3 times, killing him, and actually killed him, and his father ended up paying a lot of money and got him out of that situation. So that kind of just shows you like he is already killed
what the
somebody.
Fuck is she with him then?
I don't know, but I don't know. She is, but this is. I don't know. He was well off, and she thought like he could give her a better life or whatever. But I don't know if she like found out after that he had killed this person, before he moved to America, or if it was like she knew that going in. I don't really know. But she does talk about that having happened allegedly. So when the kids were growing up, and around the time that So Amina was older. She was 9 at the time. Sarah was 8. And both Amina and Sarah ended up telling their grandmother that their father had been molesting them. So when this happened, they did tell their mother, and Patricia immediately took them to the hospital to be examined. And then she also called CPS. She called the police. And then there was a full investigation that was going on. After the examination from the hospital, they said that there was no evidence that they had been sexually assaulted, but that it also couldn't be ruled out. And so the girls were interviewed by the police and then by the CPS workers. And then eventually they recanted their story and said that they had made it up. They said that the reasoning that they had made it up was that they wanted to live with their grandmother. They didn't want to live in the house that they were living in. So they made up that story to hopefully end up in the custody of the grandmother. But then it came out that their parents had actually convinced the kids to recant their stories. In the documentary, they go into a little bit more detail of it. Connie, who is Patricia's sister, so it would be Sarah and Amina's aunt, she says that Amina had written her a letter explaining the reasoning why she had recanted her story, saying that their parents had demanded it so that Yaser wouldn't go to jail. And that was why. And basically the letter was she was begging her aunt to not make them go back to the house. But eventually they did. And Connie kind of tells a story about how she believes that Patricia found the letter because Connie hid it in her closet when she got it so that Patricia wouldn't find it because they were living in the same house. And she believes that Patricia found it and took the letter and also took the kids back to live with their dad once again. So they end up going back, and it's really creepy. In the documentary called The Price of Honor, they show home videos, and it's very creepy. They're laying in bed and he's zooming in on their legs and saying, "Ooh, nice leg." It's so creepy if you watch it. But then there's one where he zooms in on her eye and he's like, "Oh, you have beautiful eyes." And then she's clearly uncomfortable and she's like, "Turn it off. This is," and in the one where they're in bed, he's like, it's just so weird. And she's like, "This is illegal. You can't film us while we're sleeping." And it's just, it makes you kind of believe that that's a true story that the girls had said.
God, I hate this guy.
Yeah, he's a horrible, horrible person. And that's just the beginning of it all. But yes, so everyone in the family believes that obviously the children were telling the truth and that they were being molested. But I guess their mother took their dad's side. She didn't want him to go to jail. So she ended up letting the kids go back to the house and living with him once again. So yeah, if you watch... Yeah. And if you watch the documentary, it's they have the story about all of the allegations, and then they show the home videos. It's well, it's easy to see that it's probably very truthful what they're saying just based on these home videos. It's fucking disgusting. The girls had always said to friends that their father was abusive, controlling, and that he had full intentions of going to Egypt and marrying them off to rich suitors in arranged marriages. So Amina, who was the older daughter, she eventually ended up meeting a boy named Joseph, and then they started secretly dating. And she became really close with Joseph and Joseph's mother, Ruth, they're both interviewed a lot in the documentary and stuff. So Ruth kind of became a second mother to her. And this is where she's confiding in her about, they would go into Egypt during the summer break from school. And she told Ruth the story about how her father tried marrying her off to a 40-something-year-old man in Egypt. And she refused the marriage and didn't end up happening. And then they're so that's kind of a common thing. And so they kind of always grew up knowing that was going to be the path that they would be forced to go into, would be this.
I feel like you're telling me a story of a movie.
Yeah.
A very weird movie, because I can't picture this being actually real. I know we've done crazy cases out there, but I can't, I don't know, it sickens me.
But that's not legal in America, right? You can't force someone to marry somebody just because it's their religion or their culture in America, right? Maybe if you move back.
Well, this was when they were in Egypt.
Then okay.
They would go to Egypt, and then he would meet this 40-something-year-old man.
It's legal in Egypt.
I don't know, but I don't know if it's legal. But there's a lot of in this case too that it's I don't know, if you watch the documentary and the other crime shows and stuff about it, it's I don't know. I think a lot of times the media tries to perpetuate racial stereotypes of the this culture. I'd say things about their honor killings and like all these arranged marriages. So like obviously there is some truth to that, but I do think that, I don't know, try to decide of like how much of this is just this guy being a terrible person versus like kind of, generalizing it and saying that.
How old was he when they got married?
He was 29.
And she was what?
Oh, she was 15. 15.
But I just can't believe her parents let her. That's what I don't understand. Like, they don't even, like...
Yeah, that's kind of unbelievable as well.
Like, I mean, she's 15 years old, and, like, I don't understand, like, how, like, any 15-year-old parent of a 15-year-old be like, sure, go marry this 29-year-old guy. Like, I have no problem with that. Like, what kind of fucking mother are you? Or parent are you? Like that they would even let her.
I'm also curious, like, these kids, if they're Americans, maybe they're, like, split citizenship, I don't know. But if they're Americans, they can't be forced to go back to Egypt and get married if they don't want to, right? Wouldn't that not be illegal in America for them to be, like, shipped off to Egypt to get married?
Yeah, like, I don't think that would be illegal at all, but I don't think this guy cares about anything legal. Like, he literally ran over a man and got away with it, so... I
guess, yeah. I'm just wondering if, like, the American, like, justice system would be behind them.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I don't think, but I think no one...
But if it's legal in Egypt,
right?
If it's legal in Egypt, if they are like dual citizenship, are they? I don't know. Even if they were,
but
Egypt and America, if it's legal in Egypt, could they go to Egypt to do that? Even if they don't want to, even though they're half American and it's legal in America, like I feel like that's such a gray area. Off topic, but yeah.
And like, well, like, in the documentary, they show texts like, because like I said, Amina would become really close with her boyfriend's mother, and she would be texting her and saying like, he can't like force me to go onto the plane, like, is there any way? She's like, I'm 17, like, does the law protect me at all? Like, there has to be something to, like, he can't just like drag me on the plane and like force me to go to Egypt against my will. So I don't really know. It is kind of a gray area. Like, I don't really know.
I feel like that would be illegal, almost like kidnapping.
Yeah, but like, and like, I believe, just based on what, like, just the vibe I'm getting, it's like they knew what full well, like, what the reason was for their going to Egypt. Like, it wasn't just for like a summer vacation in like their dad's homeland to like meet all of his family and stuff. Like, that was the purpose of the trip, and they knew that was why they were going.
What an awful feeling, just like knowing what's coming and like you have no control over it.
I know, and let alone like, and if that's not bad enough, like, he's also like molesting them and all this other, like, it's abusing them and abusing their mother. So he's just a terrible, terrible person, more than anything. So like I said, Amina started dating Joseph when she, I don't know exactly the year, how old she was when she started dating him, but obviously this was something she was keeping very secret because she knew that if her father found out that she was dating this guy, that it would be bad not only for her, but also for Joseph. So there was actually one time when she was writing like a love letter to Joseph, and her dad had actually found it, and she made up the story saying that it was just an imaginary guy, like she was just writing this letter to, just as a fake scenario. But he didn't believe her, and then he ended up taking things really drastically. He decided to just pack up his family and move them to a town 30 miles away. So they ended up going to Louisville, Texas, which is about 30 miles from where they were living in Bedford, Texas. And he was really adamant that he wanted to find out who Joseph was, where he lived, and everything about him. Like I said, Amina had been keeping an email contact with Ruth, Joseph's mother, and she was telling her all this stuff about how Yaser was beating her up and trying to find out all this information, basically like just beating her up until she would tell him where Joseph was. She said that he had beaten her up so bad that he had like kicked her in the face so hard that her braces had like been indented into her teeth. And then in the interview, Patricia says that Amina doesn't wear braces. So I don't know, like, if she's just making that up or whatever, but I don't really have any doubts that he was at least, beating her up. Just, like, I obviously buy that. I don't really know the braces part, but anyway, Ruth had never told Joseph all of this stuff, like all the emails that she was exchanging, because she was just for her son's own protection. Like, she was convinced that, like, if Yaser found out, or if Joseph knew, that he might try to find them, and then if Yaser would ever find him, that he would kill him. So she was just trying to keep everything secret or from Joseph, just to kind of protect him. But anyway, so they ended up living in Louisville for a little bit, and then in December of 2007, this is when things had kind of all come to a head, and they had just had enough. And Patricia eventually took the girls and fled to Tulsa, Oklahoma, along with Amina's friend Eddie and Sarah's boyfriend Eric. So the 5 of them had kind of left, and they were trying to get away from Yaser. And it says in the documentary that it was like the 2 girls were planning to run away with like these 2 guys, but eventually like Patricia ended up finding out about it or somehow ended up going with them. So it turned out to be all 5 of them going, but they ended up going to Tulsa and they destroyed their cell phones and they ended up buying new ones to avoid Yaser tracking them on their phones. Yaser filed a missing persons report for them. So he was, determined to get them back, find out where they had gone, obviously trying to maintain that control over them. So on December 28th, which was just the next day after they left, they ended up leasing an apartment in Tulsa. And then Amina's friend Eddie had ended up returning to Texas on the 29th of December due to a previous commitment. So they are gone for just a couple of days, but Amina, because she's still in contact with Ruth, is saying that Yaser is persistently trying to call them, trying to locate them, sending emails, all this stuff. And Amina notices that her mother's resolve is starting to weaken and she's starting to have second thoughts about running away from Yaser. So it turns out that she had actually been communicating with Yaser and her resolve had completely disappeared. So she ended up making the choice to go back to Texas to be with Yaser. However, she went back to Texas under false pretenses. She didn't tell the girls why she was going back to Texas. The real reasoning, she ended up telling them that New Year's Eve was the anniversary of her mother's death. So she wanted to go put flowers on her grave. She said that they're not going to go back home. They're going to stay with a friend. So she eventually convinced the girls to go back with her, knowing that, like, she obviously knew that she had to keep this from them. So they thought they weren't going to go anywhere near the house where their dad was staying. They were just going to go for the reasons that Patricia had said. So they do go back to Texas. And then once they were finally in Texas, Patricia told them that she was going back to Yaser. She was going back to the house. Amina refused to go back. She ended up going back and staying with her friend Eddie, who was the friend that she ran away with, but she refused to go back to the house. Sarah did go back reluctantly with her mom back to the house. And Amina was just determined not to go back. So she was pretty strict with that rule. She said she's not going anywhere near the house. She had always said to Joseph and to Ruth that she thought that her dad was going to kill her, and she thought that she would rather die than to go back to the house. And there's also some mention in the documentary that she might have tried to commit suicide because she was just going to take her life into her own hands because she was so afraid that her dad was eventually going to find her or somehow get to her. In the next couple of days, Patricia is begging Amina to come home. She makes Sarah text Amina saying, please call mom. She's like calling her incessantly, calling her, texting her. She eventually shows up at the friend's house that Amina is staying at. And it's like pounding on the door and just like saying, please come home. Like, we're going to work this out. We have to come back and be a family again. And eventually Amina does go back. She just can't take any more of like her mother begging her or whatever. She is in communication with Joseph at this time, and she does tell him that she's going back home to her father and she has to do what she has to do. So that is what happens. And then once they are back at home, and this is now January 1st of 2008, so it's a brand new year. And once they go back home, they reunite with Yaser, and then he says that he, because they're all reunited, he wants to take the girls out for dinner and he just wants to talk with them, make amends and everything like that. Patricia wanted to go with them, but he said no, he just wanted to have some alone time with his daughters. So he takes them in his cab because he was a taxi driver. So he does take them and he drives them to Irving, Texas. And this is when things take a tragic turn and he ends up shooting both girls in the taxi outside of a hotel. He shoots Amina 2 times in the chest and then shoots Sarah 9 times. And Sarah is able to call 911 after the attack or during the attack. And I'm going to play a little bit of the 911 audio tape, and then we'll come back and discuss it.
Irving 911, what is your emergency? What's going on, ma'am?
I'm dying. That's what's up.
Okay, let me transfer you. I'm gonna get fire department online. Okay, hold on 1 sec. Okay. What?
Oh my God! Stop it! Stop it!
Irving Fire Department. Irving Fire Department.
Ma'am, are you still there? Ma'am, are you still there? All I've got is she's telling me she's dying. I've got a, why are you still there, ma'am? Ma'am, what is your address? Ma'am.
So, what do you guys think about the 911 tape?
Like, you can obviously hear, like, the commotion and distress going on in the background. Like, it's very hard to hear, but, like, there's definitely some screaming going on, and you can, like, hear, like, obviously something terrible had just happened. It's creepy.
Yeah, I think it's so different when, like, you hear those 911 tapes where we're trying to listen, like, oh, is it genuine, or they're trying to fake something? But, like, this one, you can hear, like, just, like, the genuine fear in her screaming, and it's really, like, scary.
Yeah, and it's like you just read out the beginning of the call. She says, "My dad shot me and my sister, and now I'm dying." Like, it's so creepy and sad to hear. And in the documentary, they do go into the 911 tape a lot, and they talk about, like, it was actually a 7-minute call in total from the time that the call was first made until the time it ends. But there's also some, like, they're kind of pointing out things that the dispatcher did wrong. They have, like, shots of, like, the training manual and, like, all the stuff it says to do in there, and basically how this person didn't go by that. He says, like, he didn't hear or didn't understand what she was saying at the beginning, where it said, "My dad shot me." All he heard was that she's dying. So he missed that whole part about "my dad shot me." So all he knows is that she's dying, but doesn't know the context or the situation. And then he puts her on hold for a while, transfers her, and then by the time that he gets, like, the fire department on the line, she's, like, taking her last breaths in the phone call.
So why does he like didn't dispatch anybody until, like, he just, like, forwarded her to the fire department?
Yeah, well, in the 911 tape, he says, like, "I'm going to transfer you," and then the next part of the 911 tape is, like, the fire department getting on the line, but they are trying to locate the call, and apparently in the documentary they talk about how it's, like, pinging off different towers. They can't quite find the location. And the call was made just after 7:30 p.m. on January 1st, 7:33, I believe it was.
So was he driving around after he shot them?
No, so they don't really know. Like I said, they're, like, trying to find it's, like, pinged, but he parks in the hotel parking lot, shoots them, and then just gets out of the car and walks away. But in the 911 call, you can hear, like, she says, "Oh my God, it's not over." You can hear a door opening as if he's, like, opening the door again, trying to shoot her again. I don't think there's any gunshots in the 911 tape, but she's...
Why get the fire department? Why not just dispatch somebody? I don't understand.
I think he was. I don't know, because you can hear in that call, he says, "Fire department, is anyone still there? Fire department." And meanwhile, they're, like, trying to locate and triangulate. For whatever reason, they're saying, like, the pings are coming from all these different places, so they don't really know for sure where it's coming from.
He may have just been trying to get, like, a first responder on the line, and that was, like, the first one he could, like, get a hold of to talk to this person. Like, maybe the 911 dispatcher was, like, panicking, or maybe he was just, like, trying to get somebody else involved, and that was, like, just the first one that was available.
Yeah, because you can hear he's, like, stumbling over his words when she's like, "I'm dying, that's what's going on." He's like, "Okay, well, I'll transfer." Like, he doesn't know what to do.
Normally you don't
could have been, like,
put somebody
new
on
on the
hold,
job.
though.
Oh, say that again. I talked over you.
I said normally you don't put somebody on hold and get somebody else on the phone. Normally you just dispatch somebody right away. I'm assuming. I don't, like, I had never had to call 911, but
yeah, well, like, he just says, like, "Hold on," and then, like, there's silence, like he's, like, transferring her over, which he does to the fire department.
I mean, maybe he did some things wrong, like he didn't hear what she said, but he still knew that she was dying. Like, I don't think he could have done anything differently that would have, like, made the outcome of this any different, right?
No, and, like, yeah, maybe he didn't do everything exactly the way he should have, because I mean, the documentary is kind of calling him out. Like, they show like shots of like the training manual saying like you have to like keep them in conversation, like engage them, ask them simple questions, get all this information, and he like puts her on hold immediately and doesn't talk to her during. And like they said, like he misses that she says my dad shot me and my sister. So all he knows is that she's dying, but doesn't know any context about it.
Yeah, when I was listening to it, it kind of made me feel like he was inexperienced. Maybe this was like his first real like emergency and just maybe he panicked or something. I don't know. That's just kind of what it sounds like, but it's not like he was like, oh, I can't hear you and hung up or something, right? Like, I don't think he did something super drastically wrong.
Well, when I first heard the 911 call, I didn't hear her say my dad shot me at first until I like listened to it again.
Yeah, same.
So...
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's also easier to say now when you're like listening to it over and over again. Like, it's so obvious, but obviously you don't know that.
Yeah, you have someone telling you this is what she said, and you're like, oh yeah, I can hear that now. But like, you don't have another chance when you're the 911 operator, so.
Yeah. So he ended up just like walking after he shot them. He just walked off, left the car parked in the hotel parking lot. And it's around 8:30 p.m. Police get another call from somebody who's found the car and is saying, I think it's just like a civilian. I think it's just a random passerby who calls them and says, there's a car parked here and there's two people inside who look like they're not moving. One of them has blood coming from her ears. They don't look like they're alive. So that's where they're able to dispatch someone to that location, and then they find the car and they find the bodies of Sarah and Amina, but Yaser is nowhere to be found. And then he ended up going on the run. He was a fugitive for many years, and he eventually ended up going on to be on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for many years. And I actually originally heard about this case like 10 years ago when I watched like an America's Most Wanted case about it, or episode about it. So that's when I first heard about it. And actually stuff that I didn't know was when I watched the documentary. So they kind of call into question. Okay, well, before I get into that, what do you guys think of Patricia, their mother, like going back to Yaser after they had left to Tulsa? They thought they were finally getting away, and she knew the girls didn't want to go back. She went back under false pretenses, basically tricked them into going back. Like, what do you guys think?
I don't know. I want to give her like the benefit of the doubt and saying like because she got married so young, she was just like manipulated and she just felt like that was her only option, and she was just, I don't know, like weak and didn't have like the sense of mind to know better. That was just like what she knew, and she was told to do that, so she did it, rather than just being like she didn't actually care. That's what I want to think anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Katie that I do want to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I also think she kind of like put herself and her children in danger by going back there, because he's already like frantically wanting them to come back, and he's going to be angry, and you know that he's going to be angry when you get back. So I feel like she kind of put them in that situation, and it's like, I don't want to blame her, but I feel like she should have just not went back. Like, she should have just tried to get out. And I know like we see a lot of situations with domestic abuse, like it's hard for them to like leave, or hard for them to like stay away type thing. So like, I get that it's hard, but I feel like she kind of put herself in a bad situation, and look what happened.
Yeah, at the same time, I feel like that's kind of your role as the mother, is to like protect your kids. So like you have to kind of step up and do what you need to do, and she just failed to do that for whatever reason.
So so Yaser ended up just disappearing, and he ended up being on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, and he was a fugitive for many years. So you actually might be wondering, so there was another, like Yaser and Patricia had a son, Islam, and you might be wondering like where he fits into all of this. So at some point after the murders, and it was being deemed like an honor killing by the media and everything like that, saying that because the girls had dishonored the family by dating American boys, and they were kind of going against their traditional Muslim values. So that's kind of what it was being deemed as in the media. And one of the family members, Gail, who was one of the aunts of Amina and Sarah, gave an interview to a reporter talking about the honor killings and talking about Amina and Sarah. And shortly after that interview went out and was released, Islam ended up calling Gail and left her a very, very threatening voicemail. So I'm going to play that audio for you. It's a little hard to hear. Like, usually you have to hear it, like, make sure you're listening closely to hear it because it's like staticky and not very good quality, but we're going to play that for you anyway. And it kind of paints a picture as to who Islam might be as a person, which isn't very lovely when you listen to the message. So anyway, here it is.
Saved message, February 8th, 9:48 a.m.
How you doing? This is Sunset. First of all, let me say something. When you went on the news, my sister did not know you at all. And my sister would not even talk to you. You piece of trash. You're a fucking liar. You fucking bitch. If you talk about my sister one more time, I'm gonna sue you. I'm gonna take you off the court. I'm gonna own everything we have. You understand me, you fucking bitch? I will come over there and I'll make sure you don't own nothing. I'll take your car, I'll take your house, I'll take every fucking thing you own. You understand me, you motherfucker? If you dare even say one more thing about my fucking sister again, I will make sure you don't.
To repeat this message, press 1.
So it's kind of like, obviously you could see he's maybe on the side of his dad if he's being angry at his aunt for saying that it was an honor killing and, you know, disparaging the dad. So for him to actually call and leave this voicemail leads you to believe that he might be on the side of his dad in all of this. Do you guys have any opinions about that voicemail?
Yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with you. I feel like he is on the side of his dad, and he just feels really angry for no reason. Like, just like the words that he's saying, like, I don't know. I don't know. I just find it really creepy, and that, like, why would he be on his dad's side for one? I feel like he's gonna kind of have the same personality his dad has, which is unfortunate and creepy at the same time.
Okay, so just remind me again, like, what did his aunt say about his sisters?
So she was just talking about the killings and talking about it was like an honor killing, and explaining like why she believed that he had killed them, saying like he said that they had dishonored the family name and were too American or whatever, like basically all the stuff that was in the media saying that it was an honor killing and everything like that.
Well, to me, it kind of sounds like it's the opposite, that he's trying to stand up for his sisters, being like, don't talk to them like that. Like, they didn't do what you're saying they did. Like, it's kind of like you're portraying them as they did something bad, maybe. And he's kind of being like, you didn't know them, so don't talk to them. Don't talk about them like that, kind of thing. That's what kind of seems like he's saying to me. And I don't know, I feel like he's just like mad about the whole situation, obviously, but
yeah, like in the clip from that article that they highlight in the documentary, it says the girl's great aunt, Gail Gartrell, says the girl's Egyptian-born father killed them both because he felt they disgraced the family by dating non-Muslims and acting too Western, and she called the girl's murders an honor killing from the start.
Okay, because he starts off that message being like you didn't know my sisters or something, right? Or they didn't talk to you about anything. So it's like you didn't really know them, so you don't say that they did this, kind of thing, right? So I think it kind of is like he's embarrassed that they might have done this, but he's saying like you didn't know them, so don't say they did, kind of thing.
But like it could also be seen too as he's saying like
he's like standing up for them.
Trying to, yeah, but if you also look at it, it could be like because she's saying like they were used too Western. It was an honor killing. He didn't like that they were like not following traditional values. And maybe he's saying like, no, don't say that. Maybe you saying like they were bad or like you don't know them or you didn't know anything about them. Like maybe defending like there was a reason why they had been killed.
That's what I was kind of leaning towards what Asia was saying. That's what I think of it, but
yeah. It could kind of go both ways, because to me it kind of is like he wants to stand up for his sister, saying like, and he's saying like it's disgraceful if you do say that they were too Western or something, like that's disgraceful to their family, but he's saying like don't say that about them because that's disgraceful. But standing up for them, being like, they weren't like that kind of thing. So I feel like he's kind of in the middle and fighting, just like, don't say shit about my family.
Yeah. Like, it's very odd, and obviously a lot of expletives in there, sprinkled throughout there. But like in the documentary, they do talk about saying he was very close with his sisters. They were all like, the three of them were always very close. So, I mean, it would make sense if he was kind of defending them, but like, she wasn't saying anything bad about them. Like, she was kind of taking their side. So why would he then fight her?
Yeah, but I feel like he is kind of like his dad, saying that if you're too westernized, then that's a bad thing, right? Like, so he's saying like, on his dad's side, being like, no, they weren't too westernized. Like, don't say that about them, kind of thing, right? So he's trying to stand up for everybody at the same time, I feel.
Yeah. And like, he's a year older than them, so at the time that they were killed, it was like Amina was 18, Sarah was 17, so he would have been 19. So still like around the same age. But yeah, that's where kind of he fits in all this at that time. And then he comes back into the story a little bit later, but there actually something interesting from the documentary as well is they were sort of questioning what Patricia's involvement might have been, if there was anything. When they actually track Patricia's cell phone records, there is an odd number that calls her from Beverly Hills several times in the days before they ran away from Yaser on December 27th. Patricia claims her excuses for it when they question her about it in the documentary. She claims that it may have been for when they were selling the puppies in preparation for leaving Yaser. So they said that they were, they had put some ads up to sell the puppies. So she says that the buyer could have been from California, and that could have been the reason why all these numbers from Beverly Hills were on her phone. And they actually tracked like the number, and they said that the number belongs to a person named T. Ward. And the documentary says that that is actually one of 19 aliases that has been used by a man named Gregory. Patricia again says she doesn't know anyone by the name of Gregory, but maybe he used an alias with her if he's using aliases. So maybe she knows this person, but not by that name. And when they traced that person, it led them to both San Jose and Sunnyvale, California. And these are two cities in which the Said family has ties. So they were just kind of questioning like the legitimacy of, was there someone that was like, she was in contact with potentially? Because these were like before she left Yaser and leading up to like the day of the murder. And also they did on her cell phone, there is a call that she makes to Yaser at 9:06 p.m. on the day of the murders, which would have been about an hour and a half after the murders happened. She does call Yaser. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like, if he wasn't home right away, maybe she was calling him to see like where he was or something. So they were kind of like trying to call into question maybe if she had some involvement in it.
Maybe she was like worried that something was going to happen, and she was just like,
maybe that's why she wanted to go with them. Remember, he said he was going to take them out to dinner. Maybe that's why she wanted to go with them, because she was afraid of what would happen if he went alone with them.
Yeah. But then in the documentary too, she does say like he was a good father. She didn't think that he would hurt the girls or something. She does say that. The same woman who
doesn't sound like he's a good father. Everything you've said makes me point to like he's like the shittiest father.
Yeah,
I've almost ever heard of.
So she's like in denial, clearly. Like, she just says that with like just being serious. Like, no, he was a good father. I don't think he would ever hurt the girls. So that's very odd for that to come from her when knowing what she knows about what he's done or whatever. So it's like she's almost defending him and is kind of in denial. So I don't know. But
I don't know. I want to believe that like if she knew he was going to do something like that she would, step up and do something, right? Like, I don't want to think that she would just kind of let it happen and claim innocence.
But like, it's so sad that like they ran away from him and they were finally like, maybe things were going to get better. They had finally escaped him, and they like gotten rid of their SIM cards. Like, they destroyed their cell phones and everything because they were trying to block off all communication. And then she like, backs down and kind of like starts taking his calls again. And then that's when she makes the plan to go back to Texas. And then she like lies to her daughters and says that they're going back because of this other thing, which is not the real reason. So like, obviously her actions is not a good thing knowing what we know now. Not saying that she knew that was going to happen, but obviously if she didn't take them back, it wouldn't have happened. So the murders happened on January 1st of 2008. And then he, like I said, he went on the run. He was on the FBI's most wanted list, and there was like no leads or anything in the case until August 14th, 2017. And this was when a man matching Yaser's description was reportedly seen in an apartment that was being rented by Islam Saeed in Bedford, Texas. So there was a maintenance worker who was scheduled to do some work in the apartment, and he said that he went to the door, and he had tried to open the door, so he couldn't get in, and he said there were people inside. They did agree eventually that he could come in and do the work, and he noticed Yaser, or he recognized him. I guess he had seen him on most wanted lists or something, so he did recognize him. So then he did immediately alert the FBI about it. At 6:30 p.m. that night, an FBI agent went to the apartment, and a man who matched Islam's description came to the door but refused to cooperate. And then the FBI agent said that he also allegedly heard a call to someone saying, "We have a problem." And the cell phone records show that the call was made to Islam's uncles. So very likely that was him calling his uncles to say, the FBI's onto us, they know we're here. And so they obviously knew that this was a good lead. They were onto something. So at around 1 a.m., the FBI came to the house and broke into the home and discovered that the apartment was abandoned. There was a sliding glass patio door that was open, and underneath the patio, there was a tree that had some broken branches, kind of like someone had jumped from the patio and landed onto the tree. And underneath the tree there was a pair of eyeglasses that they took for evidence. And they kind of just scoured the apartment looking for DNA items. They collected items like cigarette butts and toothbrushes. And the DNA that they ran from those items matched some DNA that had been taken from Amina and Sarah. And it was determined that there was a high degree of probability that these items belonged to Sarah and Amina's biological father. So they knew that Yaser had been in that apartment. And they knew that they were onto him, but he had escaped. And he was on the run again, and there was no sightings of him again after that. However, Islam, on August 26th of 2017, so this would have been just a couple of weeks after that, Islam was found at the Canada-US border as a passenger in a car, and he had told the Border Patrol agents that they were just taking a road trip. And for whatever reason, they didn't identify him. They let him go. So he was able to cross the border or whatever. So that was kind of the end of that. And that was in 2017. And there was no leads for 3 more years.
Wait, so he got away for that long? That's crazy that he got away with all that. He was one step ahead of everybody, which always seems to be the case with these kind of things.
Yeah, and it's I know in the America's Most Wanted, the FBI was saying they believed he was in New York City. He was driving a cab in New York City because he could have been anywhere, right? If he had escaped, who knows where he could have been. But all of this had happened it was in Bedford, Texas. So that was the hometown where they were living when the murders had happened. So he had never actually left his hometown. And I also read in an article as well that the landlord, as part of their investigation, the landlord said that the apartment was rented by Islam Saeed, who he knew had been had connections to a fugitive, but somehow he still let him rent the apartment and didn't say anything or do anything. So he was allowed to be one step ahead of everyone. They should have gotten that warrant to go into the house a little earlier. Might have made a difference. But however, in August of 2020, so it's actually quite recently, in Justin, Texas, so again, this is 30 miles from Bedford, Texas, so very close to where it all happened. The FBI began surveillance of a home that they believed to be owned by members of the Saeed family who had ties to Yaser. Shortly after they started the surveillance, they conducted a search warrant of the home and they arrested Yaser. They arrested Yaser's brother Yasin as well as Yaser's son Islam. And they were arrested in Euless, Texas, the same day as Yaser. So they weren't physically with him when they were arrested, but close by. So Yaser is now charged with capital murder. And because it's in Texas, he could face the death penalty. Obviously, he has 2 counts of capital murder. Islam actually ended up pleading guilty to harboring a fugitive, conspiring to harbor a fugitive, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. And on April 27th of 2021, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for these charges. And Yasin, who was Yaser's younger brother, was convicted on conspiracy and harboring a fugitive charges as well. His sentencing is scheduled for June 4th. So we don't really know yet what his sentence will be. But he's awaiting sentencing. He was convicted, he was considered guilty, so he will have a sentence, whatever that is. But his son's going to jail for 10 years, and Yaser could get the death penalty.
Oh, it's so frustrating when they don't find these people. So I'm so glad that this latest update is they found him. I thought you were going to be oh, they escaped. And I was oh my fuck. But yeah, so
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, this is just gonna have like one of those unsolved or uncaptured stories.
I know, and that's why when I watched the America's Most Wanted episode and all that, and like the Crime Watch Daily episode of it as well, those were all done before he was captured. So like those are what I had originally seen. I thought he was still on the run, and it was only when I started researching this case for this episode then I saw the new updates. I'm like, oh, I can't believe he was actually found. Like, because I originally saw this case like 10 years ago, and I had always kind of been like frequently would think about it, and the fact that he actually got captured, and he was like right under their nose. He was like 30 miles from where it had all happened. Like, it's not like he tried to flee the country, go back home to Egypt, or like even leave the state. There were some family members as well that said that they don't believe he ever left Texas. So while they were still searching for him, they were like adamant that like, no, he has to be in Texas for whatever reason. They knew that he wouldn't go too far. But the fact that his son was like helping him escape justice for killing his sisters, like, it's crazy.
That is crazy. Like, does Islam like support his father in what he did, or is he just kind of like, he's my dad, so I'm gonna help him even though I don't agree with what he did? Does that ever come out?
Yeah, it didn't really ever come out. Like, he pleaded guilty to everything, and he doesn't really. I couldn't really find information. I know Yasin, Yaser's younger brother, who was arrested. His lawyer was saying like that he didn't know the full extent of what Yaser had done, and obviously wouldn't have helped him had he known. But that's after he was arrested, so who knows? He's probably just saying anything he can right now.
Yeah, I guess if you're willing to like harbor a fugitive that you know their crime was really that bad, then you have to kind of agree with them on some level. If you don't like turn them in.
And they also do place a lot of blame on Patricia as well, because obviously she had a big part in this, like with bringing them back to Texas and stuff. So it's hard with her because, like Steph was saying earlier, like, you know, when there's domestic violence, like it's hard. It's easy to say like, why don't you just leave? But like, obviously there's so many factors. It's like so complex. But it's just like sad to think like the fact that they had finally gotten away and they thought like they were going to have the life that they always thought they would. And like Amina was like so happy to be out of there. Sarah too. So the fact that they ended up going back and they were only gone for like less than a week. So it didn't last very long.
I also find it weird that Islam didn't go with them. So like he kind of was left there with his father.
Maybe he didn't have a reason to leave. Like he's probably treated.
I guess he was older too, right? He might
a year
not
older.
He might not have lived with them at the time too, though. So.
But it's crazy that like their mother was like an American and like that wasn't how she was brought up. Like those weren't her values to like, you know, sell your daughters off to the highest bidder, and like she still was kind of supporting her husband in that. Maybe it's because she got married at such a young age. Maybe she felt that's kind of like her family kind of did, right? Like, but I don't know.
And like she does talk in the documentary. She said she was like scared of Yaser, so obviously this wasn't the person that she felt that she could really argue with about that. Like she probably realized pretty quickly that it was like what he wanted was going to happen, and he was just like control. Like the whole documentary, he's so controlling. Like they got a job at a convenience store, and he would like videotape them at this convenience store, like sitting in a car across the street, and they would smile at a customer, and he would say that why are they smiling at the customers? Like they're in trouble for smiling at them. Like it's so creepy.
I guess when you think about it, she was only 15 when she got married. Like you're 15, like you're not even old enough to drive a car yet. It's like you're not even mature enough to be able to drive a car, and she got married to this like really controlling man. So I guess it does make sense that she was very, you know, manipulated and was kind of accustomed to what was happening to her because it was so young, right? If that happens to you so young, you just kind of like that's just what life is now.
But where are you meeting somebody who's like 29 and like your age?
Double your age.
I'm double your age older than you. Like I don't know. I just don't know where you're meeting these people that your family's okay with you dating somebody who's like a creeper.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, you know?
Creeper.
Yeah. And like to put it mildly, like that's one word for him. But I don't know. And like
a pervert, like that's another word.
Mm-hmm. A molester, a rapist, also other
fucking
words.
Murderer, like
allegedly. It's all alleged.
Alleged pervert.
Like he allegedly shot them in the taxi.
He was an alleged pervert.
Yeah, yeah. And he allegedly shot them, even though she says in the 911 call that her dad shot her. So, but it's alleged.
So he actually hasn't been charged yet.
No, he's been charged.
Convicted, I mean.
Yeah. He's still awaiting sentencing.
It's so sad for these two girls that were like trying to break that cycle of like I don't want this to happen to me, and like this is, you know, almost a worse fate happened. Like it's
and it was so sad because it's like the family talks about it. It's like she always would say like if I go back home, he's going to kill me, or even when she was still at home, like, I know he's going to kill me. Like, it's just a matter of time. It's not so much like if, it's like
I
when.
wonder if Patricia went with them, if he would have killed her too.
Yeah, I don't know.
And now she's thinking maybe she should have went.
But it's also very, like, I don't know what to make of Patricia, because, like, in the documentary and all the interviews, it's like when she's describing, like, him having affairs on her, like, she's sobbing uncontrollably when she's talking about that, but when she's talking about the death of her daughters, she doesn't cry as much as she's talking about the affairs. I don't know. It's very odd behavior, I feel like. But then, and then she, like, backtracks and says, like, oh, all the pictures that we took, like, with him with a knife to my throat, like, those were just for fun, like, it wasn't serious. So, like, she's making excuses for him, saying he's a good father.
She's terrified of him, especially, like, you know what I mean? Like, this is what he did. He'll probably do that to me as well. I just feel like she totally betrayed her daughters, though. She like handed them to him. It's really sad. Like,
and like, I guess, like, to be fair, like, it is a thing. Like, you know, someone who's abused, it's like that. It's a common thing that does happen. So I don't want to be like too hard on her as well. I need to recognize that, but that doesn't make it okay that, like, basically allowed her 2 daughters to be murdered by this man.
You might have said this, but I don't understand. Like, why is it called an honor killing? Like, he honored them by killing them?
No, well, they dishonored the family by wanting to marry, like, Western boys and not, like, marrying into the what is it, the Muslim faith kind of thing.
But I was kind of saying earlier, like, there is a section of the documentary that talks about, like, a history of honor killings and, like, actually shows some pretty, like, gruesome videos and photos of, like, honor killings, so it's kind of gross. But it's like it's maybe not legal, but it's accepted. It's like if the women, like, do something that the men don't agree with, and they can get rid of them, and that's completely acceptable. Yeah, and, like, but I did just want to say, though, like, I don't know, I've kind of touched on this earlier, but I do feel, though, that sometimes, like, it is used in the media as a way to, like, stereotype and, like, you know, it's kind of like using that stereotypical, like, racist trope of, like, honor killing. Kind of like when we were discussing the Adnan case, when they were using the honor killing defense, saying that was his reasoning for killing her. Like, I feel like it's often used as that kind of, like, way to, like, racially profile or, like, discriminate. So I don't really know if I really want to have any part of that conversation, but, like, he's just a horrible person either way. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, like, murdering is accepted. I'm saying, like, that's probably not correct, but, like, if they dishonor the family by not marrying who they're supposed to, or they do something they're not supposed to, like, they can disown them from the family, and that's, like, completely acceptable. It's just like they're not part of the family anymore. Maybe not going so far as killing them, but they can completely disown them. That's,
and, like, this might be, like, a tragic, like, example of,
like,
or like like, over the line kind of along that same vein, but not, I don't know. I just think depending on how I don't know. Sometimes the honor killing conversation is hard to, like, not, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about that culture or, like, about that at all to, you know, sit here and be like, like, I don't know enough about it, so I'm not gonna say that much about it, but.
And, like, they do have some experts in the documentary who go on and talk about honor killings, like people who study it, or, like, they know a lot about it, so maybe they're better people to talk about it. So I don't know, but I just think at the very least we can all agree that Yaser was a horrible person who killed his 2 daughters and raped them, and allegedly, and did all this horrible stuff. And at least he was captured, and it has, like, a semi-happy end. But even though, like, I'm reading, like, all of the charges and, like, that they were captured, Islam got 10 years for harboring a fugitive, all this stuff, like, I still feel like it's not enough. Like, even if Yaser gets the death penalty, like, I don't believe in capital punishment, but, you know, like, he got captured, but they're not going to bring them back. Like, it's still tragic for them.
Yeah, I feel like he'll still stand by what he did, and he's, like, proud of what he did because they dishonored the family. So if he has to go down for that, then he's like, well, I'm just going to. Like, so I feel like it doesn't matter to him. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It just it doesn't seem like it's enough.
And it's kind of scary to think, like, Islam, he gets 10 years and he gets out and he could be just like his father. It's actually kind of creepy to think.
But it's like Islam and his sisters grew up in America together, so, and they're only a year apart, right? Like, from him and his older sister, or the oldest daughter. So, like, it's just weird that their views would be so separate. Or maybe they weren't, and then he just kind of had to kind of be on his father's side, or the same thing was going to happen to him, kind of thing.
Yeah. So, like, the documentary I've been referencing a lot actually came out, like, a number of years ago, obviously before he was captured and before all that. But there is a more recent interview with Patricia after he was captured, saying, like, she hopes that he spends his whole life in prison and all that stuff. So, like, it's been, like, a significant number of years since that documentary where she's, like, defending him. So maybe she's come around since
defending
then.
Yaser, like, saying she hopes. Okay.
Or she's saying he hopes he spends his life in prison. So like she's against him now, like saying like, you know, and her son as well. Islam.
Oh, so she's against him as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it just took her a little bit of time to like step back and get out of it and be like, yeah, this really wasn't a good situation.
Yeah, yeah. So I think like maybe that documentary now isn't like the best representation of her like current feelings. But obviously at the time that it came out, she maybe had different thoughts about it. But it's been like 12, 13 years since it happened. So she seems to have come around, at least in the most recent interviews I've seen with her. But yeah, it's a really sad case, and it's really tragic, obviously, how it all ended, or for the girls. And it's I don't want to say a happy ending that he got captured, because like obviously it's horrible that it happened at all, but at least, you know, he's gonna get, there's gonna be justice for. Yeah, it's not like one of those stories where it's like he's still out there, and like I just find the fact that he was in Texas the whole time, like right under their nose for 12 years. The fact that he could like be 30 miles away from where it happened and like just evade capture for 12 years is crazy.
I know, like he must not have been working. He must have just been like chilling around that same house the whole time and just like chilling or like freeloading like that whole time. Because how could they not? Like he must not have had a job, or he must have had a fake ID or an alias the whole time, right? Because there's no way.
Yassine and Islam are the only two that were arrested for like helping him, but there's also like some, you know, speculation that he had his other family members helping him as well. So there is possibly more people who knew about it, knew where he was, that were also helping him evade capture. So maybe there's more arrests to come.
Yeah, I also find it crazy how like brazen he was, like how he did it and where he did it. Just like shot them in the back of his cab in a parking lot, like in the middle of everything, right? Like he could have done it somewhere where nobody like would have noticed, or you know, he could have even made them disappear and no one would have found them, but he had to make it so like it was super obvious. So yeah, that's shows how, I guess, arrogant he is as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. And obviously he was able to escape for 12 years, which is pretty crazy. But I also want to just read this one last thing. So just in the statement that the U.S. attorney had made following Islam, because Islam ended up pleading guilty to the charges. The U.S. attorney, Purak Shah, said Islam Saeed prioritized the whims of his father, an alleged killer, over justice for his own sisters. Thanks to the work of the FBI and its law enforcement partners, however, Mr. Saeed's efforts were ultimately in vain. We are grateful to the many agents and officers who worked to apprehend Mr. Saeed, along with his father and uncle. Sarah and Amina deserve justice. So, yeah. Did you guys have any final thoughts about this case?
I just find this whole case really crazy and really, really, really sad. This guy is like the scum of the earth, and
it's like I'm telling the story, and when you hear it, like in the documentaries, it's like it just gets progressively worse and worse and worse. Like when you think that's the worst that it gets, it just gets worse and worse. Like he just does one horrible thing after one horrible thing.
I was just like looking through the documentary, and there was a picture of like Islam as a kid holding like this gun in his hand. Like he's like not even a kid, he's like an infant. And there's a picture of him like standing there with a gun in his hand. An infant.
There is a video too of Amina like holding her father's gun, and she's like pointing it at him like jokingly, just like kind of eerie, creepy in retrospect, knowing how it all turns out.
Yeah, I'm like, I just feel for those girls. Like I can just remember like, you know, like being a teenage girl and just be like, you know, like loving life and not having to worry about any of that kind of stuff. I can't imagine having that kind of pressure and that stress, and then like actually worried that your father's going to kill you. It's just like so sad. And then he actually does. It's just like, it's really hard to believe.
I know. And also like so excessive too. Like when he shoots Sarah 9 times, like that's so excessive. And she's still able to call 911 after that.
Like why her 9 times and not like...
I don't know.
And she was the one who called 911?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Like, talk about the will to live.
Yeah, when you listen to that, like, 911 tape, it's like she's talking and then she just, like, stops. Like, she can't even talk anymore. It's like you're right in the moment with her, like, as she's actually dying. Like, that's really scary.
It's crazy. And it's so creepy in the 911 call, too. Like, you can hear the door opening and she's saying, like, he's not done. Like, obviously he's still there, like, while she's on the phone.
Oh, it's so scary.
Like, it's so crazy. But,
yeah. It's like so vivid as she's like talking. I can just like picture what's happening, and it's like, oh my god.
I know, and it's like dark, and it's like, you know, like 7:30 at night with like this.
It's terrifying. And like
creepy.
the sad thing is, like, they just like knew this was coming, right? And like they said if they went back that their father was going to kill them, and like that's what happened. It's just awful that they saw it coming. I'm just like so surprised that like nobody was on their side more. Like, you know, like nobody stood up for them enough to get them out of there.
And like maybe it's like easy to say, like maybe they don't know the full extent of what's happening at home. If they're not in the same house, they're not seeing them every day.
I know, yeah, it's so easy for us to be like, oh, they should have done this, but in the moment and when it's happening, it's just so much more difficult to even know what's going on. Oh, she, like, probably, now that she's, like, stepped out of that situation, I'm sure she has so much guilt and regret and, like, sadness of how things went down and how she handled it, and she probably thinks she could have done things differently, even though, it really wasn't her fault. Like, she was so young when she got married and all this happened. I can only imagine how she feels. And I do feel bad for her as well.
So we'll put a link to the documentary. It's called The Price of Honor. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, and we'll put other relevant links and stuff in the show notes if you want to know more about this case, because there's probably some stuff that we didn't even cover because there's a lot of information on this case. But yeah, so that does it for this case. If you like what you heard, you can follow us on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast or on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1. We do have a Gmail account as well, so you can send us your case suggestions, your feedback, comments, anything you want. crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. Make sure you give us a review and a rating on your podcast streaming app that you use if you're able to. That would be really, really great. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week with a new episode. So, thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.